21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
So we use the Profit platform, Martin, as a way to define problems or profit leaks that are going on in a business. The Profit platform itself is our strategic approach. It's our registered trademark. It's something that I wrote on a conference room board 20 years ago. Somebody asked me the simple question, what I was going to do as a business analyst looking at the business. And I broke down what I would consider to be the 4 pillars of any business. I don't care if you're a startup to a $2 billion multinational. That's business development. How do you make it rain? How do you drive revenue in the door? Organizational engineering, that goes from how do you recruit people? How do you pay people? How do you retrain people? How do you train people? How do you retain them? How do you create incentives? How do you create that entrepreneurial thinking in an organization? Process engineering is all about efficiency. Every organization, every business that I've ever looked at has leakage in efficiency, whether it breaks because of communication or defective systems integration. That just is every business. I don't care if you're a manufacturer, you're a contractor, you're a transportation company. Process management and systems management is all about how do you do what you do the most efficient way you can do it, because we live in a competitive bid environment, right? Somebody else wants to do the business that you're doing, and you always have to stay competitive. And I drive that with good measurement practice. And people think of measurement as P&L and balance sheet. I think of measurement in the form of operational measurements. How do I drive people? Measurement is not about lording over people. Measurement is about empowerment. If I give people good information, they know what's expected and how it's measured, most good people rise to that occasion, right? That's good leadership. My name is Rob Braiman. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've opened near 10 companies over the course of my 30-plus year career. I currently own 3 companies, arguably 4, if I count a wholly owned subsidiary of Cogent Analytics. That's our mothership, right? Cogent Analytics is in 35 states. We represent small business owners. That's what we do for a living. Through that process, it's allowed me to acquire or partner with some clients that needed special assistance, where I acquired a majority stake in the company, and am helping them turn it around and build it into something else. I have been advising clients for 23 years in my career. I've represented literally thousands of entrepreneurs across America. Cogent Analytics represents really 2 phases of business, and we call it the $500,000 to $2 million client. Those are our more innovative clients. And then we have our more traditional type client, which range from that $2 million threshold up to $200 million. So most small business owners, they start from a good place, good heart, good ideas, and every single business hits threshold of dysfunction. Like it or not, you're going to go through certain plateaus in your business. And most of that is driven around the owner wearing too many hats and not building a strong leadership structure within their company. I see this through thousands of clients. You'll see clients that plateau somewhere around that $1 to $2 million small client base. They wear every hat in the business. And when they start to build that organization, maybe it grows from 2 million to 5 million, but there's always seems to be that next threshold somewhere around $4 to $5 million. This is still heavily owner-based type of operation, more than it is organizationally based type of operation. The owner still is in control. And what that does, Martin, is it minimizes the overall opportunity for that business to grow and scale, and ultimately be the wealth creation vehicle that the owner had in their mind when they started. Somewhere between $5 and $10 million, the behavior that forces to come to pass is really building out your leadership and your organization and your systems management, which really pushes authority away from your desk as an owner and begins to build leaders within the organization that are ultimately responsible for different segments of profitability. Most small business owners, as I said in your prior question, are very, very talented. They have great ideas. Most often they see their business through the lens of I can. And the interesting thing about that lens of I can is it loses sight of, the real growth that happens within an organization, because time and time again, people within the organization are seeking every decision to run through the owner, as opposed to the owner realizing that through empowerment of good leadership structure, each member of that leadership team should be an active participant, right? So they create their own pain, right? They are their own first roadblock. And in, I would say, near 6,000 clients that we've represented in all facets of small business, we see this as the number one roadblock to most small business ownership. Everybody who's at, that $3 million to $5 million mark talks about being able to grow their business to $10 million. Every client at 10 million tells me they want to grow to 20 million. Everybody at 20 million always figures out, that next threshold is 30, 40, 50 million. The interesting thing about it is they talk about it in the sense of I, as opposed to the team or the organization or the systems or the structure or the process. So you ask, why don't they bring professional people into the organization to be able to get good advice? Because ultimately an entrepreneur at their core is a do-it-yourselfer, right? Every single entrepreneur, and I have my people, analysts, project directors, consultants that will come to me and say, this client is a do-it-yourselfer. And I always say, well, no kidding. They wouldn't be an entrepreneur if they weren't a do-it-yourselfer. Being able to cross that psychological barrier with a client is getting them to understand sometimes when they're living in their forest, as opposed to getting up above the trees and looking down, they tend to have a very myopic perspective because everything is coming at them from every direction. What we try to do is pull clients above their trees and genuinely look down and discover what are those areas of impediment or impingement that are happening in their organization, right? What are those roadblocks that can be torn down and rethink of the organization through clear eyes? If you're running a business and it plateaus short of the rate of inflation, right? And we see that inflation could be 1%, 2%, 3%. We've been through a period where inflation was as high as 10 or 12% over the last 5 years. If your business isn't keeping up with inflation and or growing beyond inflation, you're actually going backwards. If your business is stagnant, in other words, your organization is not growing at the pace that you want to grow your business, you likely have the wrong people in the wrong chairs. These are just signs that you can see. And keep in mind, Martin, we all as entrepreneurs care about our people. We hire them, we train them, they become assets within our organization, but we can't lose sight of the fact that if you're genuinely growing your company, you have to be honest with yourself about the individual that you have in a leadership chair and whether they are capable of performing what the company needs, right? The first thing I say is look at the systems within the company so as to protect the people. But occasionally we run into a circumstance where the people are genuinely misplaced or misguided in an organization where the company can't grow beyond the core capacities of the people that you have in the chairs, right? Softness in profitability, softness in cash flow, softness in long-term equity growth. These are all critical areas that if you're stuck at a plateau, having, and it clearly doesn't have to be us, Cogent Analytics, but having an opportunity for a peer group or someone else to give you the honest truth about your organization, I think is an empowerment exercise. That's not taking anything away from you, the business owner or the leader. It's about empowering you because you're getting an additional perspective, looking at your business through new eyes instead of the same eyes that you look at every day. And I have that conversation with entrepreneurs every day. People are reticent occasionally to participate in a discovery process. That's what we call an analysis of a business. That discovery is always an empowering exercise, because what it does is look at every facet of the organization within the 4 pillars and allows you to walk away from that experience with real substantive information that allows you and your team to look at those challenges in a fruitful way, as opposed to it being the blame game. The funny thing, and I'll just speak personally, this is my own personal journey as I've built multiple companies to $100 million, right? At different stages of my career, I always had to challenge myself in my own personal growth. I started as a military guy that became a business owner at a very young age. And you can imagine I was a much different person at 26, 27, 28, 29 years old than I am today, just months away from 60. Right? That maturity that happened over the years mostly came from hardship, right? And I'm sure every entrepreneur that's listening today would appreciate that, when you owe the bank, when you owe the government, when you take care of your employees, when you have to take care of your customers and your vendors, we all become wiser as we get older. Right? And the real tough part of that wisdom is the hardship that goes along with it. Now, the real question for some business owners that get stuck is, how frequently do they look inward and ask themselves, why am I stuck? Right? Which I myself struggled with at different points over the course of my career. Even when I've been advising other clients and growing Cogent Analytics, there's plenty of occasions going from 6 employees to 250 employees that I myself am building out a leadership team. And sometimes I call it the Peter principle, Martin. Sometimes I promote somebody to a position where, that person proves that the organization has grown beyond them. And I have to make the tough decision to replace that person with somebody of greater talent or greater experience or greater additive to the organization itself. Well, that was never about them. When I leave somebody in a position that, I've done them a hardship by putting them in a position they were incapable to do, that's not them. Usually that's me. My inability to deal with those challenges, my emotional tie to that individual that I brought into my organization, because I, like every other person, I have a heart, right? I care. I know their family. I know them personally. And yet, I'm ultimately responsible for all 250 families, not just the one. So as you can imagine, and I deal with thousands of clients, if I have that struggle every day of, even with inside Cogent Analytics, as we continue to grow at 20% a year, I can't imagine all of the entrepreneurs that we represent and the entrepreneurs that come to work here at Cogent. Right? We all face those same challenges, Martin. So I'll personalize it at the end and make it emotional. That way I'm not talking down to people. I'm making it a personal experience. We've had the privilege of representing thousands of clients, and it's somewhat of a unique process in that, our business development process is a consultative process. We take the time to get to know our clients before we will ever conduct a discovery. And as you can imagine, we get a lot of initial sales resistance at that point of discovery, because clearly allowing an outside set of eyes to come in and participate, you have organizational fear. How is my team going to react here? How am I going to react when I have to have an honest conversation about my business? Once we get clients past that first fear-based understanding that it is meant to be an empowerment exercise, that's where our analysts are deployed. And these are guys that have all been presidents. Every single member of my team has been a president of an organization. Most of them have a decade or longer of experience. doing a full-blown analysis or discovery of the business. By intention, it is meant to take experiential learning of representing thousands of clients to being able to find immediate issues within a business. And we frankly only take, the discovery is meant to be a deliverable. It's meant to make the client better at that point of discovery, because we're really careful about moving clients forward to a consultative process. I've never believed that consulting is good for everybody. I think there has to be a clear financial return and ROI before we will ever consider a client. That's number one. And number two, and probably the thing that we think is most important, Martin, is that a client has to own where they're at. Right? Now, the discovery process most often will expose those areas of inefficiency or deficiency within the business, but that doesn't mean we Cogent Analytics, have to represent them. But, if you go look at the thousands of success stories that we've had with clients all across America, that common thread is that we don't just look at the business, we look at the portrait of life. We look at that client and what stage they're at in their life. Are they accomplishing their goals? For some clients, that's participating in their church. For some clients, that's getting their life back with their wife and their children, being able to go to ball games and owning their business instead of their business owning them. Everybody's portrait of life is different. And that's probably one of my greater joys being the president of Cogent Analytics, is that I've always said we change lives for a living, not just the business. And I will kind of put this in context. I have never felt that an entrepreneur wanted a better business. I think ultimately what entrepreneurs want is what that better business provides for them and their families and their employees and their families. That's probably the driving force behind everybody here at Cogent Analytics. Is we don't just look at how do I make a business more profitable, more efficient. I mean, you could go to our mission statement, and our whole mission statement is increase profitability, improve cash flow, and enhance equity value. But I think it's deeper than that, because you have people at the end of the day called entrepreneurs. The hardest job in the world is being an entrepreneur. It's taking the risk and saying, I'm going to open my own business. And I've always believed for the last 23 years that if you lose sight of the people in that business, then what type of consulting are you really doing? I have always taken the principled belief that Cogent is about thought leadership. And we have put massive amount of resources for entrepreneurs. If you go to cogentanalytics.com, we have an entrepreneurial quiz that is meant about self-assessment. And I promise you that if you want your results, we'll give them to you for free. We're not going to spam your email out. We never do the hard push. We have an indication of value tool that is available on our website. We have a marketing and website audit available on our website. We have countless number of white papers. We have countless number of case studies. That's all about making entrepreneurs better. And I would encourage every one of your listeners, short of if you want to speak with an advisor, we have people manning the phones every day, talking to clients every day, trying to help entrepreneurs through the everyday, very real challenges of being an entrepreneur. And I've done that from the very beginning of time. I think that's probably been the jet fuel behind our escalated growth. Is I've never asked people to do anything other than learn and empower themselves. And how do you become a better entrepreneur? How do you take care of your family? How do you take care of your employees? How do you participate in your community? So I would encourage every listener to go to cogentanalytics.com. Those resources cost you absolutely nothing, and there are 1,000 points of reference that can make you better.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.